welcome back to the greatest show in the galaxy, the show where I, the curator, discuss my personal favorite show of all time, personal favorite franchise of all time, Doctor Who. And today we are doing something that I wanted to do 2 months ago-ish during the History Month. If you remember, we did the covering the historical moments of Doctor Who, and I had a very interesting idea that unfortunately, my fault, I'm afraid, I didn't quite coordinate well with my guest, and unfortunately we had to postpone it to today. But thankfully, this month has 5 Mondays in it, so I can play around with this format a little bit. And this person that I wanted to get is one of my dearest friends, and I love making shows about them, even though we kind of rarely do stuff with Doctor Who. Say hello to my good friend, all the way from West Dakota, Taco.
I was so ready. I was like, here we go. And then he threw out the West Dakota, and I'm like, what? Oh, my God. Oh, man. 50-50-50. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great.
That's good.
How are you?
I'm great. And I want to, don't give yourself all the blame for us not working out 2 months ago, because sure, you might not have coordinated it with me, but you did tell me like once or twice, and my brain, especially 2 months ago, I was going through a lot, and it was in one ear and out the other. So it was both of our faults, but here we are now to rectify the situation.
Shared blame. And you know what? At least I managed to find a last minute good idea to wrap up that month, and we're still doing it now. So I guess, in all honesty, it's kind of a win-win after all.
Yeah, it worked out. Yeah, that's good.
Now, people who watched last week's episode will remember that the birthday section was saved to the very end of that episode, as opposed to at the beginning of every single episode, as we have done for the better part of a year and a half now. And the only reason it was saved to the end was because I, very foolishly, listened to one of Frenchie's stupid ideas. So after that debacle, I decided to bring this section back to the beginning of an episode, and this is where it will remain for as long as I run the ship. So
I don't want to get in the middle of a 50 to Frenchie, but
I don't think anyone does.
No.
Yeah, so birthdays, right? So today we're counting down birthdays for people who had a significant contribution to Doctor Who, or even geek worlds outside of Doctor Who, from the day of the July 4th all the way to July 10th. Now, could you possibly think of any significant birthdays from July 4th, hint, hint, all the way to July 10th?
Well, do we consider birthdays of countries?
Or possibly people who are on the screen right now.
Oh, is your birthday July 4th?
9th.
Oh, July 9th. Okay. All right.
But yeah, the July 4th was exactly where I was trying to lead the conversation. Also on July 4th, interestingly enough, Miss Patricia Russell. She was a director of one of my least favorite episodes of all time, The Massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve, as well as Invasion of the Dinosaurs, Pyramids of Mars, and The Horror of Fangrok. Sorry, Horror of Fangrok, with no death. But I mean, one of the earliest examples of a female director in Doctor Who. I felt that was significant enough to bring up. Also on July 4th, Mr. Marcus Wilson. He was a producer on the last 2 Matt Smith seasons, all the way from Impossible Astronaut all the way up to Time of the Doctor. He also was an executive producer on the Doctors Revisited, which also came around with the time of the 50th anniversary special. On the 5th of July, this is a bit of an interesting one. Philip Maddock. He was primarily uncredited on a lot of... No, sorry. Wrong person. He did a lot of small roles, but the number of episodes he's associated with, I think, is worthy enough to be on the list. Of course, he played Broccoli. Never quite figured out the guy's name. In the Daleks Invasion Earth movie with Peter Cushing, the second Peter Cushing movie. He was in The Crotons, The War Games, The Brain of Morbius, The Power of Kroll, and on Big Finish in Master, as well as Return of the Crotons. On the 7th of July, we have Mr. Matt Irvine, he was primarily a visual effects designer and assistant on many different episodes, including The Face of Evil, The Stones of Blood, The Creature from the Pit, Warrior's Gate, and even A Girl's Best Friend, along with Warriors of the Deep. Less said about that one, the better. Of course, he was the canine operator for that one Sarah Jane episode with Slitheen in it. No idea why someone thought it was worthy of bringing that up. But interestingly enough, also on the 7th, Mr. Ringo Starr.
Hey, I know him.
Yeah, that one. So, bit of a controversy, but if you happen to be lucky enough to own one of the original copies of the 1965 episode, The Chase, there's a bit of a scene in there where you get treated to a scene of the Beatles performing, I think, for the Queen, but I mean, so all the Beatles are essentially credited on that episode. So, hey, I got to bring up Ringo in this episode.
Yeah, that's good. I'm always down whenever we bring up one of the drummers of the Beatles. Not the best drummer.
Yeah, not the best drummer in the Beatles.
It's one of my favorite quotes of all time.
Me too. Also on the 7th, this is probably the biggest name. Well, not probably, easily the biggest name on this list. Mr. John Pertwee, the third Doctor from all the way back in the 70s. I mean, he is the Doctor. He's one of my absolute favorites. Definitely a top 5 Doctor. And, he's the greatest. Finally, on the 7th, also Mark Ellis, some guy I think we both know from.
Yeah.
No relation to Doctor Who, but yeah. He's also on July 7th.
Well, there you go.
On July 8th, Mr. Eric Chitty. He, of course, played Coordinator Engen in The Deadly Assassin. And Soda really liked the guy when he watched the episode. It's kind of the only classic episode.
It's like a knockoff Vader mask. Or is Vader a knockoff mask of this guy? Helmet. Vader helmet.
I always thought Vader's helmet was more inspired by samurai shoguns or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, but you're right. It's Magneto.
Yes, I'm just now noticing it now that you mentioned it.
Definitely Magneto.
Yeah, definitely inspired by the Magneto helmet. But like I said, Soda really liked the guy, so I'm putting him on the list. And speaking of liking people, on July 9th, in addition to my birthday, you have Richard Pierce, who played one of my least favorite companions of all time, Jeremy Fitzoliver, in The Paradise of Death and The Ghosts of End Space. He was
just the worst.
He was so annoying and forgettable. I even forgot to include him on the list for last week. That's how forgettable he was.
You forgot something about Doctor Who?
I mean, I want to forget I ever heard the guy's voice, if it makes any sense.
Wow. Tell me how you really feel.
Yeah, I really hate the character. Now, we got several people on the 10th. First of all, Miss Jackie Lane, another annoyingly forgettable companion, Dodo Chaplet, who, again, the less said about her, the better. But on a more positive note, also on July 10th, John Sim, the Master. Technically my first Master and a lot of people's favorite Masters of all time. Definitely a worthy adversary for the David Tennant Doctor. Now, these last two on the 10th, I think you're going to find pretty interesting. So first off, Peter Serafinowicz.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm sure you've heard of him, right? He was in Guardians of the Galaxy. He was the original voice of Darth Maul. He was in The Tick, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
He also was the voice of the Fisher King in one episode of Doctor Who. But I mean, Peter Serafinowicz. You can't have a geek-themed show without having him on, right?
Yeah.
And finally, Jamie Glover. He first played William Russell in the pseudo biopic special An Adventure in Space and Time, and of course he later kind of got by default cast as Ian Chesterton in the David Bradley version of the first Doctor Adventures on Big Finish. He's also, and this is the interesting part you learn if you actually listen to the behind the scenes stuff on the audios, he's also Harry Potter in The Cursed Child on stage.
Oh.
And something else I learned while researching this today, he also is the voice of Darth Malgus in the Old Republic MMO game.
Wow. Now you're saying something I remember. There you go.
I knew you were going to like this. And I swear, I tell Snark this all the time. It's purely coincidental when these things happen. Like having you on here, and you've got Darth Malgus and Darth Maul.
Yeah, nice. Malgus, the return trailer, the Knights of the Old Republic return, or just Old Republic return trailer, where Malgus got debuted. It's one of my favorite lightsaber fights of all time. So yeah, it's
you and I talked about that lightsaber scene, like, and fun fact, last week in the birthday section, we had David Prowse.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, we got Darth Vader, Darth Maul, and Darth Malgus.
Darth Malgus. Wow, those are 3 of my favorite Darths. They're all 3 in my top 5. Yeah,
cool. Mine too, as a matter of fact. So for the wonderfully long list of people we had today, thank you all. We quite literally could not do this without you. Now,
especially Darth Malgus.
All right, especially Darth Malgus, yeah. I mean, I like him as Ian Chesterton in the audios, but to me, there's no beating the original. Like, he's an S-tier companion, in my opinion, and I think he does a really good job doing his own spin on the character. But on to the main topic of today's show, and really, I think at the end of last year, that there is a Doctor Who audio episode that heavily focuses on Mr. H.P. Lovecraft himself, called The Lovecraft Invasion. And I know that there is no one in the world I know personally who knows more about the works of H.P. Lovecraft than yourself. So I asked you to come here, and you so graciously agreed. So
I do want to say a couple caveats. I'm not a H.P. Lovecraft fanatic, and I'm also not an expert. There are people out there who are. I have listened to a lot of Lovecraft once or twice, like all the way, all of his big ones, and a lot of it, his small little itty bitty ones, like Cats of Ulthor, what actually does get brought up in this, which I was really happy. That is my favorite. But I have a love-hate relationship with the man, which what we will get into. And it's funny because my dislike for him isn't only his personal views on things and how he liked to write them in, but I also don't love his writing style. I think the guy is one of the best world builders of all writers ever. The guy's imagination was insane. But even his writing style, like, I feel like I'm just listening to nothing but exposition. Like, there's never a character I really care about. Like, he's got a really odd writing style that I don't love. But we'll get into it more. And I listened to this Doctor Who audio just a little bit ago because I wanted it to be fresh in my head. And I really enjoyed it. I knew nothing about the Doctor Who stuff going on. I had to keep, because, it was an audio. So I had to keep Googling what people look like so I could try to place it in. And I found out which doctor I was dealing with. It was the 6th Doctor, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Look at that. I know stuff. He's the one with the lapel and the weird curly hair.
Yep. The flamboyant Doctor, as some people like to say.
Okay. He does look flamboyant. He didn't seem that flamboyant in the audio.
Yeah, I mean, that's audio for you. But
yeah.
Here's the thing. So I'm coming in at this direction from someone who's very steep in the Doctor Who lore, knowing fuck all about anything Lovecraftian except Cthulhu. That's like the only thing I know of. And that's like the main thing people know about.
Yeah.
You're coming at this from someone who knows a lot of the Lovecraftian lore, knowing absolutely nothing about Doctor Who. So it's a nice juxtaposition. And while I was listening for it, by the way, I listened to it like a year or so ago. That's where I got the idea of us doing it together. But to prepare, I actually re-listened to it twice more just to get reacquainted with the story. And while I was listening, I was like, please let this stuff make sense to Taco. Like, I was hearing all these names of Lovecraftian creatures that I know nothing about, and I just hope Taco knows what these creatures are, because I sure as hell don't. So like,
I knew most of it. So I want to state right now, compared to you, I know a lot about Lovecraft. Compared to like a Lovecraft fan, I'm not super great. And there are Lovecraft fanatics who have listened to all the fiction that has been, because most stuff written in the Cthulhu verse and the Cthulhu mythos is not written by Lovecraft, and it's all written by friends of his and fans of his. And I haven't read any of that. So it's this gigantic, the size of the Star Wars extended universe, right? So I'm going to state right now, if Lovecraft was Star Wars, I know all of the movies. That's where I'm at, right? Like I've listened to the kind of the main ones, the really big ones called Cthulhu, Shadows of Innsmouth, and Mountains of Madness. I've listened to all of those, and I've listened to, or I've also watched most of the books based off a lot of his stuff, and things like that. And I've also done just deep dives into H.P. himself, a lot of it. And so I'm definitely not a layman, but I'm going to say right now, if there's any hardcore Lovecraft fans watching now, don't expect, like, if you're like, whoa, he got that wrong. I probably did. All right. I'm not an expert by any means. I just wanted to get that out there. Yeah.
So to use your Star Wars comparison, it's like, from a Doctor Who fan, it's like you only watched the TV show without the audios or comics or novels or anything
Probably
else.
Just the modern TV show.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. Because I know a lot of people who consider themselves huge Doctor Who fans who've never watched the classics. So, yeah.
Soda.
Yeah,
just say
soda.
So, obviously, we'll go over the story itself a little bit, because you kind of have to explain the settings and some of the characters. So, of course, we start off on a space station on Titan, which I think you probably know what Titan is. It's one of the moons of Saturn.
I was going to say Jupiter.
Yeah, I think
maybe it's Saturn. I wasn't ready for actual science.
I'm pretty sure that's Saturn, because I think that's also where Thanos was born. Yeah. Thanos from the Marvel's universe.
It's Saturn.
There is no Thanos in Doctor Who that I know of.
Well, they'll do a Doctor Who and Marvel crossover one of these days. Yeah, it's the moon of Saturn.
Well, I mean, Disney now has the distribution rights for Doctor Who, so maybe.
Well, there you go.
But yeah, we're getting reacquainted with one of my personal favorite doctors and one of my favorite TARDIS teams for that particular Doctor, the Sixth Doctor, played, of course, by Colin Baker. And he's joined by his companions at the time, Flip Jackson. By the way, that's short for Philippa. I don't know if that threw you off, Flip Jackson. And, of course, Constance Clark. Now, a little bit of background of these three characters. Obviously, this Doctor, as I mentioned, the more flamboyant Doctor, he's got this, you probably noticed this, he's got this penchant for long, complicated words.
Mm-hmm.
And he sort of has this condescending nature about him, is particularly on the show. It got a little better in the audios. That's why he's one of my favorite Doctors from the audios, not the show. And Flip Jackson, or rather Philippa Ramone, because she's married now, she is basically just a modern shop girl from a contemporary time, which places around 2016-ish. And Constance Clark is a World War II Wren, essentially a code breaker for World War II, and she's also actually the squad leader of the squad of Wrens from World War II. She kind of ran away from the war in fear that her husband might be dead because he was considered MIA. Plus, later it turns out that he didn't actually, was actually on deep undercover. They came back, and they came back as per usual. Doctor Who several years later, he thought she was dead. He married another woman, and she was like, "I'm done. I'm back traveling through time and space with the Doctor." And I believe she still does, as current stands with the audios. Now, this episode also featured the debut of Calypso Jones. No image for her.
I couldn't find one either. Yeah, I looked. Yeah,
I mean, me too. They only appeared in two audios. This one, and they reappeared again in the end of the beginning, which was the last of the monthly ranged episodes. And they are let me see if I can get this right, a mixed race, pansexual, trans non-binary person from a future that's coming whether you like it or not, and not sure if they're entirely human or not.
Well, yeah, it seemed like mixed like species, not even
Yeah.
mixed race. Yeah. So
In other words, everything H.P. Lovecraft hates.
yeah. Of course, if you're going to do a story such as this, where you kind of give Lovecraft his earful that he deserves, right? You need to have a character such as this,
Yeah.
specifically for that. Like, hey, I'm what you consider inferior and not okay. Watch me be a perfectly good person, like and
Watch me be better than you.
yeah, it's such a weird. This is going to be a very heavy topic because of Lovecraft's racism. It's really hard to cover Lovecraft as a person without getting into some really dark stuff, especially talking to a Jewish person from Israel, and I know how insanely racist he was to Jews. He was a fan of Hitler. He did die before World War II and before we heard about the Holocaust, but so we're not. He never learned where it led. But as far as like Mein Kampf, he was like, I like the cut of this Hitler guy's jib, which is awful. Is absolutely bad. So it's so difficult to discuss Lovecraft with not like, I don't think there's a way that you can overstate how hateful he was. And it's funny because people do say that you either need to like you have to pick a lane, either condemn his work and not watch it, or separate the artist or from the artist. Like there's no other way. But I think that is so wrong. I feel like acknowledging who he is and where the art's coming from is the only way to understand Lovecraft, because it's so in his work, which they do bring up in this audio, where it's like, you can't listen. You would have to be deaf to read, or deaf or blind to read his stuff and not feel the racist and hatred through it. And it was such a part of his work that you can't turn a blind eye. But at the same time, I don't think that you should ignore it, but you shouldn't praise him ever.
Yeah. And again, several points that I want to bring up, that even while this episode is set, which I believe is 1937, 1936, 1936, before he passed away,
right before he died.
So by that point, Hitler has already done certain racist things against the Jews, but nowhere near quite as
he knew about. I'm sure he knew about that stuff, but no one's knowing about the big, the concentration camps. I'll just say no one knows about the Holocaust yet.
Yes,
I'm not saying that he's not already doing some of it.
I think by 1936 they already had the Nuremberg laws and the Crystal Night, the Night of the Long Arms.
I was just gonna say Night of Broken Glass.
Long knives. Sorry.
What was it the Night of Broken Glass? In Berlin, where they first started.
Nacht.
Yeah.
Where they shattered all the glasses.
Hey, that's all awful.
The National Boycott Day, I think, was also the name of it. But so it's thankful that we have a character from actual World War II.
That was really cool too.
Actively fighting against Hitler's views and beliefs, which were also shared by H.P. Lovecraft.
I kind of wish that they brought that up, but I guess it would have been a little heavy. Like the fact that she was in World War II is like, I think, mentioned in one line, but between her and Herbert, there wasn't a lot of like, oh, you actually like the dude that that I went to war against. Like there wasn't any of that actually mentioned. And I remember thinking when I found out that she was in World War II, in it, I was like, oh, is this going to get brought up? But I feel like they could have explored that slightly, but I don't know. So much happens in this audio. I can understand why they don't have time, because it's literally, this thing is so packed for
very
2-hour audio. Yeah.
I think to my mind, they focused more on Calypso's view against H.P. Lovecraft than Constance, which is weird because Constance is no pun intended, the constant companion, and Calypso literally just debuted in this audio.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, if I had any criticism, I feel like it would have been meant something if it was a character that Doctor Who fans, which I'm not, really knew and loved, and it wasn't a lot of stuff. Like if they had a character from like, you know, in the show or something a little more that delivered those lines, but it still doesn't make them any less important by any means.
yeah, true. Yeah. And so the right off the bat, as most Doctor Who stories start, they kind of start in the middle of something. Like they're already running away from something or chasing something. Either of the two, they're chasing a creature called a Somnifax, which apparently was designed by scientists on the Titan Labs in the 51st century. A creature specifically designed to infiltrate people's minds and essentially turn their nightmares into reality. That's pretty much stated in the first 5 minutes of the audio before we even get in. Is
it called a Somnifax, right?
Yeah.
Okay, No, you said it. I haven't said it out loud yet, so I want to make sure I was pronouncing it right. Was this a character from the greater Doctor Who lore, or was it this monster?
It was like the generic one-off villain of the week for Doctor Who, as they do all the time. Like 98% of Doctor Who villains, just one story each.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of iconic returning villains, but the fact that it's like 2% of the greater whole just lets you know how many villains are just
2%.
Yeah, I said 98%.
Yeah, I know, but like you're like there are thousands, and that's 2% of them. Like, oh my god,
yeah. It just goes to show you how many of them are just one-offs.
Yeah.
They never get brought up again, like the Somnifax, who, of course, as the story goes, infects the mind of H.P. Lovecraft in 1936, and the first creatures that get manifest are these night gaunts. I hope I'm pronouncing these correctly, and of course that is where the Doctor, Calypso, Flip, and Constance get introduced to these creatures before they even realize that it's H.P. Lovecraft. Now, here's something that I think is interesting: is that the introduction of Lovecraft is like, at first glance, before you even know that it's him, he kind of seems like a genuine, nice dude. He's even like, "Oh, hello, Mr. Maymill. Let me save you the trip for the mailbox." Like, they try to portray him as a regular person before they introduce all the racism stuff. And I think
yeah, we're gonna say the same thing, but that's really important because racists aren't always, you know, people chasing you with their pitchforks. You know, like. Racism and hate comes.
People in Shrek.
Yeah. Racism and hate comes from smiles. They come from your neighbors. People. I know people in my family who are horribly racist. Who they meet somebody of the race that they will tell me is inferior, or are friends with them or work with them. They're going to smile. They're going to shake their hands. They're going to be nice because racism and hate is cowardice. That's what it is. That's what H.P. Lovecraft is. He's a coward. And it. Of course, and that's very important to know is you know, I'm sure there are plenty that are joyful and nice on the surface and really polite regardless of who you are to your face, but that's because it's different. You know, hate and racism is in somebody, deep down in somebody, and it's really good to make this normalize the person. Not normalize the hate, of course, but normalize the person because it's normal people, everyday people who have these horrible beliefs. Yeah. And that's what's important. Yeah.
And to people and it's brought up several times in this audio, is that to people that they consider to be of their kind, of their race, they're the nicest people in the world. Like, he tries to get friendly with Constance. He even calls the Doctor his equal at one point and another, and I love the Doctor's response.
Whoa. Let me stop you right there, HP.
Yeah. And we will get to that. I actually saved, I have written down the entire speech at the end. I'm going to read it off at the end. But yeah, so then it just becomes a pretty generic Doctor Who plot. Like, the Somnifax is in the guy's head. What's the most natural thing to do? The Doctor and Flip go into his brain, while Constance and Calypso are standing guard, making sure that no creepy monsters show up. Now, here's what one criticism I want to bring up is that from the get-go, Flip has been introduced as someone who knows of Lovecraft stuff from the game that she played with her cousin, and it's like she knows stuff. But if you actually listen to the episode, and again, I re-listened to it twice over again, she doesn't really contribute that much with her knowledge. Like all the creatures that she's supposed to know of, the Doctor eventually figures it out for himself. And if they give her more, like the Doctor doesn't recognize some of these creatures, but she does, I think it would have elevated her character.
They couldn't decide what it, because even at the beginning she didn't know. She's like, "Who's H.P. Lovecraft?" And they're like, "Oh, he's blah blah blah." She's like, "Okay," and then it's like, "Oh, this is a monster." She's like, "Oh, I recognize that from this and this." So they couldn't decide whether she's the character or the POV, the audience stand-in to learn, because in order to do exposition, you need a character to go, "What's that?" So you can tell that person.
Companions exist in this franchise.
Yeah, that's why companions exist. So they can't decide whether she's that or the person who knows the stuff. Like they flip back and forth with her, and I thought it was kind of goofy. So yeah, I share with that criticism. I did like the kind of, more of the mundane knowledge of H.P. Lovecraft, because there are a lot of people who can recognize Cthulhu and maybe read a couple who don't know him. And that's what's important, because there are a lot of people who are like, "Oh, the big squid thing from the opening of Rick and Morty. That's so cool." But you don't, but those people don't know the horrible stuff that he's written in letters to other people. And they haven't seen how he describes a person of color in his books, which is just awful. Yeah. So.
And that right there is you coming at it from a Lovecraft fan perspective, as a Doctor Who, coming a Doctor Who perspective. Flip is one of my favorite companions, but she's one of my favorites because she's usually portrayed as the funny, relatable girl. She's the girl next door, the one that knows geeky stuff. She always talks about Harry Potter and stuff like that. Like she's the one that you want to be friends with. She very rarely gets the chance to be the intelligent person that knows more than the Doctor. Like especially for the Sixth Doctor, most of his other companions are these smart, learned people. Like he's got a history teacher as a companion, a botanist student, a computer genius, a World War II Wren, and he's got Flip, who's like the adorable girl next door who doesn't really get a chance to shine much in the brains department. This could have been a chance to really focus on this character, and I think they really kind of blew it with this portrayal.
I don't know if it's so far blew it, but I mean, I don't know the character as well as you do, but she did come off geeky because she is talking about a board game and a role-playing game that I have played with my nerd friends, so it did get in there a little bit, where I was like, I do feel like she is somebody who I've hung out with, like a nerd friend of mine, like I did kind of get that up. So
yeah. But again, I think it would have helped a lot if she would have recognized all if not most of the characters than the Doctor. But you know what? I think we harped on this point.
Yeah, we got it.
Yeah, so eventually they walk into the wild and crazy, wacky world of inside H.P. Lovecraft's mind, which essentially was kind of manifested into being by way of the Somnifacts. They meet this character that you're going to have to help me with some of these characters. Wilbur
Whateley, right? Wilbur Whateley. I haven't read these for a long time. So Wilbur Whateley is from the Dunwich Horror. This is the one I read the first. So I have not checked out Dunwich in a long time, but he's kind of a I'm going to get things wrong and it's going to anger H.P. Lovecraft fans, but it's this big Dunwich Horror is such a big one to discuss, but it's essentially a redneck who is like half Lovecraftian monster, and it aged him really quick, and he's kind of like this really big, nasty freak. I don't know. It's kind of hard to describe, and there's just so much more in there. But yeah.
So is this an example of a character that suffers from Lovecraft's views on certain people?
No. He's essentially just a good old monster. Yeah. He's no. Lovecraft's views are mostly Wilbur Whately. Lovecraft's views are mostly from the way the story's actually written is horrific as that. So it's less that his characters share those point of views, but it's the text shares that. So if I were to, I'm going to try not to say anything too horrible, but if there's a character who's going through a town, he meets a white guy and he describes a white guy like a normal guy, and then he'll meet a person of color and describe them in grotesque ways, but the book is describing him, right? So it's the text that is usually horribly messed up more than actual characters, especially not villains, because he would consider these horrible views as normal, and your villains wouldn't be sharing that because they're bad. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's sort of similar to how, and this is going to sound weird, but this is sort of similar to how J.K. Rowling describes certain characters in her book. Like, if you actually read all the books multiple times, you'll notice that there's a certain distinction between how she chooses to describe incredibly obese people, depending on whether they happen to be the good guys or whether they happen to be the bad guys. Like, the way she described some of the Dursley people is done in an incredibly demeaning and horrible way.
Yeah.
But the way she describes characters like Hagrid or Neville, she describes them as sort of adorable and relatable ways. So it's two sides of the same coin, the way she chooses to
and
portray,
it's pretty much what you're saying, but yeah, and essentially it's the way that his hate manifests is literally the way me and you would write anything. Like, it's so normalized in his text that it doesn't even feel malicious, and that's what makes it so nasty, because he's not even trying to be hurtful. His normal speech is just ignorant and awful, if you get what I'm saying.
So yeah, I'm getting what you're saying. So basically it's so normal to him, so he's basically writing it the way he sees it, the way he thinks.
Yeah, and in his mind, I bet he wasn't even trying to be like, I bet he didn't even think, he was just describing a character, and he didn't even realize what he was doing.
Yeah,
that's how ingrained it was.
Yeah, and even in the story, when Calypso tries to help him, he just calls them a mongrel spawn or whatever.
Yeah, and that's about as nice as you can get. There is definitely.
I mean, they have to keep a certain level of in this audio.
It's hard for me to even discuss it without using some of the words he used, and I won't use any of the words he used. But it's so odd because the text is, how do I describe it? Like, it's not hate literature. Like, it's not like, the point of the story is never to be marginalizing something. Like, there isn't a short story out there that the point is, but whoever these people are less human or evil or whatever. But he's writing his stories about his cosmic horror and these really amazing things, but just inside the text, it's like, it's so hard to say, but it's like it's hidden in there, and it's just a part of his text, but it's never the point, if you know what I'm saying. Like, it's never a malicious thing where by the time you're done reading,
the background part of it. Like,
it's never the point.
Racist.
Yeah, it's not ever the point. So, like, here's a good example. In Shadow over Innsmouth, the point of this short story is this guy going to this town where people are kind of fish shapey. They have this Innsmouth look, and they kind of have these these eyes that don't blink and thin lips, and they're kind of fishy. But in the middle of this, and the whole thing is like the fish people started like messing with this guy, and then he eventually finds out that his ancestry, he's got a little bit of fish guy, whatever. That's the point of the story, right? And then you find out about these deep ones and these old gods, and that's where a lot of this power comes from. This is all Lovecraft.
These guys.
Yes. Well, those are the deep ones. Yeah, but the Innsmouth look is a little lesser, but it's a little more half human, half fish. But in that book, he meets a black guy, and he then describes the black guy in horrific ways. So it's not part of the book, but it just when it comes to meeting a person of color, he then describes them in god-awful ways. So it's like I said, so again, it's not the point, but then subculture, like really deep sub in the subtext, the whole point of it then would be when he found out that he has non-pure Aryan DNA himself. A lot of people think that that Shadow over Innsmouth is how the main character finds out that he has this fish person DNA. Maybe it's subtext of when he found out that he had non-pure Aryan DNA. And you want to know what the non-pure is? Welsh. That's how horribly racist this dude is. That Welsh. Ooh. Like West Europe or West British. Oh my God. Oh my God. Yeah. It's so awful. But so it's hidden in the subtext like that, but it's also so blatant in the text. But like I said, it's never the point, if you get what I'm saying. And going back to Wilmer Whately, I just had to make sure I don't want to say anything wrong. So he is the he is a half monster. So he is half human, half outer god hybrid. So he has a twin brother. But yeah, they were spawned by a outer deity named Yog Sothoth, because Lovecraft loves things like that. So yeah, he is essentially a half old god monster hybrid of like a redneck with a redneck.
Yeah. Yog Sothoth?
Yog Sothoth, yeah.
I think I actually heard this character's name mentioned in The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy.
Possibly.
Have you ever heard of that show?
I love Grim Adventures. Yeah, I watched it when I was a kid. I haven't watched it since. It's not one I've revisited, but I loved it. I think they called
him Yog Sothoth or something. But
well, there's also Lovecraft gets stolen from and copied, a million constantly. Like
Tolkien, for example.
Yeah. But I mean, Cthulhu is literally a recurring villain in South Park. But what was his name? Shogoth. Is that his name? I'm gonna get it, but there's a no, or those are the Shogoths. So I'm gonna get it wrong. But there's a Doctor Strange bad guy who you can fight and play as in Marvel vs. Capcom 2. Whose name is like that. And he's a big squid, one-eyed squid monster. So even Marvel steals.
The Dweller in the Darkness, I think. Yeah, I know the one you're talking about. I read the comic. Just been so long since I did. But I think, yeah, there is a character called Cthulhuos, but not the one you're referring.
I'm gonna literally.
Shumagorath.
Shumagorath. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So, the point I'm trying to make is, Shumagorath, I just found out. The point I'm trying to make is, Lovecraft gets just blatantly stolen from by everybody, right? So, so there's even Doctor Strange characters that are, just you slightly change the names, but you'll hear it's usually like Uba Goth Gaku Wabath. Like there's there's a rhythm to yeah, Goth. Yeah. Shogoths, which they're from Mouth of Man, or in the Mountains of Madness. Mouth of Madness is a John Carpenter movie that is a Lovecraft homage. So that's how I'm getting mixed up. In the Mouth of Madness is a 90s horror writer who's essentially Lovecraft without all the hate, and his creations start coming to life. It's a good one. Sam Neill plays the writer. Yeah, it's a good one. It's a good little Carpenter movie. Check it out.
And speaking of which, Flip and the Doctor then gets chased by one of these Shoggoths.
Yeah,
And
yuck.
the only person that can stop them, apparently, and I really hope I got the right picture, Randolph Carter.
Yeah, that works. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what he looks like. I've only read his name. So.
Well, in the audio specifically, he's referred to as what H.P. Lovecraft sees himself or what he wants to be, which it's easier when it's played by the same actor, of course, but
yeah,
because audio, you got to save on people. But so he's basically like the protagonist of some Lovecraft's books, or
yeah. I mean, they're not like a lot of them, and not even like the really big ones, but he is in a few that are here and there. I mean, it's not like it's not like it's his main character by any means. It's not his James Bond, if you will, but he's here and there. One thing Lovecraft doesn't do well is characters. You can read one of his full stories and you won't even remember the main character's name while you're reading it. Like, characters isn't really his strong suit, and that's one of my, literary criticisms of the guy is so much of it. Every main character is like half of his main characters are like reporters or journalists or students, and they're learning it, and we just learn Lovecraft stuff as these characters learn Lovecraft stuff, and then at the end of the day they go, okay, cool, and that's like what this story. So it's interesting they chose this guy, but I understand why. But I think they did have to reach for a character such as this.
Yeah, because someone like me coming in from just purely the Doctor Who perspective, you could be mistaken into thinking that he's like the main guy. Like he's the Nick Fury of his universe, the guy putting things together.
I have his so it says, as mentioned, the following tales, so it's not a lot. There's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 7, and none of them are any of his really, really, really big ones. So the Statement of Randolph Carter, the Unnameable, the Dream Quest of the Unknown Kadath, the Silver Key, the Case of Charles Dexter Ward, Through the Gates of the Silver Key, and Out of the Eons. These aren't his big main ones. So, but he is even stated that it is presumably an alter ego of Lovecraft himself. So even outside of the Doctor Who thing, he is considered that. Yeah.
Okay. So, well, that's something we learned, or at least I did.
I mean, his stories aren't any of the ones I've listened to. Like, because there's still, again, there's a lot of Lovecraft, and I've stated already multiple times, I'm not claiming I'm being an expert, because there are so many short stories, and you really do have to kind of pick and choose. And compared to what a lot of people have done, I've only listened to a small handful. Yeah.
Okay. And
or read. I say listen because I do audiobooks.
I mean, this is an audio, so no one's faulting you for that.
I'm glad.
Now, here's the reason why I kind of have to look some of these up, because eventually later in the story we meet Dr. Armitage, but I cannot for the life of me remember if it's this guy or this guy. So
that looks like Pickman.
Okay, so that's Pickman, and that
might be the guy with the painting might be Pickman, because Pickman's Model is a really good short story. And that might be, the other one might be Pickman.
Yeah, so this must be Dr. Armitage then, who has the Necronomicon. I know what that is, at least. But, yeah, so eventually it turns out to be that it's actually the Somnifex taking the guise of Dr. Armitage. Did you have enough knowledge of Dr. Armitage to tell us?
I do not. I am sorry.
Okay.
I'm looking to see if it's somebody who I can grab, but no, nothing's really popping up right now.
Really, the only important stuff is that he's the one that just has the Necronomicon, and he needed the Doctor and Flip to recognize it.
Okay,
and Carter, of course. so he
Got
can
it.
grab it and morph into one of his other forms. And then obviously that's one of the cliffhangers, which then brings us to, of course, some ghouls that are actually managing to break through Lovecraft's mind into the real world and haunt Lovecraft, Constance, and Calypso in the real world. And one of them is, of course, led by Pikmin, as you mentioned.
So I'm gonna go back. I do know him. He is. I just forgot his name. Yeah. So he's from the Dunwich Horror, which I have listened to. So he is a professor at the Massachusetts University, which is kind of like their big college. And yeah, so he is a character in one of the biggest one, the Dunwich Horror. So yeah, which is it's the first real one I ever got into because of Fallout, actually, because the Fallout video games love Lovecraft as well. So yeah,
Makes sense.
yeah,
And as for Pikmin, can you tell us anything
yeah.
relevant?
Pikmin's model is a great one. There's like three I would suggest for you to listen to Lovecraft ones that are really short. Pikmin's model, I think the audio is like 30 minutes or less. The Cats of Ulthor is like a absolute, like, everyone needs to listen to the Cats of Ulthor. It's kind of adorable. But Pikmin's model is definitely one of his biggest ones. So this dude is doing these really horrific paintings of monsters like that, and it's this guy talking to Pikmin, the artist, and it turns out he has more and more of these paintings that he's not even showing in, and you find out he's painting the monster himself. So this really nasty monster, Pikmin's model, is letting this guy paint him. And it's just really cool and creepy short story. So yeah, Pikmin's a fine artist who paints this demon on his spare time.
So to go back to your point, what you said earlier about how Lovecraft's work keeps getting copied and used all over the place. There's a Doctor Who spin-off show, The Sarah Jane Adventures. There's an episode called Mona Lisa's Revenge. Makes more sense when you actually watch the episode. But it's explained there that there was a painter around the time of Da Vinci who used to paint these horrible, horrific, monster-like, nightmare-fueled paintings that really eventually got him hospitalized in what that era's version of a loony bin would have been. One of which was a painting that was described to be so horrible. By the way, this isn't the real thing, by the way. That's something that he invented for the TV show. But it was so horrible, reportedly, that anyone who looked at it went insane, which I believe is also consistent with a lot of Lovecraftian eldritch horror.
Yep.
And was essentially painted around the same time as the Mona Lisa. And of course, yeah, Mona Lisa is a real person. She came out of the painting frame. It's a whole story in and of itself, but that's basically an example of how Lovecraftian mythology can show up in any way you look, anywhere you look.
Yeah. Again, with Fallout, there's Pikmin's knife, and there's this whole in Fallout 4 a whole mission where you're getting art for this like serial killer crazy guy named Pikmin. So Pikmin's model is right up there with Dunwich Horror and Call of Cthulhu and Shadow over Innsmouth, where you'll see it all over the place. And I just typed in Pikmin's model really quick, and it said that there's even the Guillermo del Toro Cabinet of Curiosities episode starring Crispin Glover and Ben Barnes called that's based on this. So yeah, it has been adapted in the anthology series twice. An episode Night Gallery starring so it does get used a lot. Yeah.
And another place I just remembered, another thing that where Lovecraftian horror gets mentioned is, of course, with this thing right here, Mimikyu. Like it said that the actual real this is just a tarp that is wearing a costume, a disguise. The actual creature living inside is reported to be so horrible that looking at it could cause someone to die. And even the game that it was introduced in, the Sun and Moon, the Alola games, also introduced the Ultra Beasts, which in and of themselves are inspired by Eldritch God, Eldritch horror, and Lovecraft monsters.
So when you look at Lovecraft as the genre of cosmic horror, which a lot of his stuff is cosmic horror, a lot of it isn't, but a lot of his stuff is the idea of this big, huge, galaxy swallowing monsters or whatever, like this idea of these gigantic, huge gods. Pokemon is full of cosmic horror, like Pokemon, Star Wars, Rick and Morty. Of course, Rick and Morty is cosmic horror. Like if you get through the nihilism and the fart jokes, dick and fart jokes, it's chock full of cosmic horror. And and there's so many. I mean, Marvel even. Like Galactus is a freaking old god,
And also Adventure Time.
Yeah.
Like it's revealed that actually Gunther, which at first glance is just an ordinary average penguin, is in fact a cosmic horror deity called Orgalorg the whole time. Have you watched Adventure Time, by the way?
Not as much as other people. Just a little bit here and there. I didn't. For some reason, I was rejecting it when it first came out, and I shouldn't have. I should have just watched it.
But, yeah, I was also rejecting it when it came out, but as was the case with a lot of franchises, when it got added to Lego Dimensions back in the day, I was like, sure, I'll check it out. It's Lego now, so I gotta watch it.
Yeah, you might as well watch it now. Yeah.
Yeah. There was a period of time where like, if they make a Lego game in it based on this, I gotta watch it. That's how I learned about Ninjago and Lego Chima. And here's something, I'll say something that might blow your mind here. And we might not want this guy to know about it, but I never watched Back to the Future before Lego Dimensions. That and Ghostbusters.
Tisk.
Yeah.
Tisk.
So yeah, Lego Dimensions in many ways was one of the best things that ever happened to me, and I'm still butthurt over the fact that they canceled it. But
yeah,
that's just me. So the Dr. Carter and Flip eventually get put on a ship that's making its way to and this is where I'm gonna fall and die here. The city of R'lyeh. Even the Doctor doesn't know how to pronounce this city's name.
Yeah, there's a lot of Lovecraft things that you can't name. Like,
I think even Lovecraft at one point corrects one of the characters saying that
it's Cthulhu. Yeah,
Cthulhu, not Cthulhu.
Cthulhu. And there's a lot of like people who say Cthulhu, and then they'll correct each other. It's all just nonsense words, guys. But yeah, Lovecraft, of course.
Ancient Egyptian words. No one knows how it's meant to be pronounced. Yeah. It's all just speculation.
Yeah, this is the. I want to say it's the. Because this is where they go to resurrect Cthulhu, but I believe this is in Call of Cthulhu, the like city at the bottom of the ocean, temple for the old god at the bottom of the ocean. I want to say that's what this is. So yeah,
and that is of course where they.
There's real Lovecraft fans who are watching this, going, "What is so wrong?"
This might surprise you, but I sometimes get things wrong while I'm making this show, and I'm watching this show after it uploads, and I'm like, "You idiot! How could you get that wrong?" And I'm correcting myself on some of these things.
Hey, I tried to make Star Wars lore for a while. I know all about being told I'm wrong on the internet.
Don't we all?
That character wasn't using that lightsaber style while he was using two lightsabers in that fight. What are you, an idiot? I guess. He was using Jarkai with Surisu, not Jen So. What are you, dumb? I guess
I don't think these people realize that we are doing this live. We're not doing it with the actual material written in front of our eyes. We're just doing it off of memory. That's why we get these things wrong.
Well, and so much of it's so subject, and so much of it so how I interpreted it. Like, well, I interpreted it being this way. Like, I'm sorry that you think I'm wrong, but it's just like your opinion.
For what you're saying, it is. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it's ever stated anywhere which specific lightsaber form each character uses. It's like
it
identified by the moves that they perform.
It is in Legends, for the big ones. We know which ones, you know, we know, like, for a fact Kid Fisto uses Shicho. We know for a fact that Sarisu is Obi-Wan Kenobi's main one, and then a lot of other people. There are, and we literally, yeah, but then, like, we don't know what Darth Malgus uses. I'm pretty sure he uses Genso, right? Like, we don't know. Like, there are characters where we're not 100%, but we can just tell. Like, in my headcanon, like, Kylo Ren is a 9-man user, but I will be told I'm wrong. And maybe there is a weird book or comic or whatever out there where it says something, and I just don't know about it. You know, like, so when you're, you know, all about it dealing with Doctor Who, but when you're dealing with lore and mythos so big that it's impossible to know all of it.
Yeah, and there's always discrepancies in these things, like the colors of Time Lord chapters, for example, doesn't really necessarily track. Like, we know that this is not going to make any sense to you, but we know for a fact that Barusa is of the Prydonian chapter, and of course the Prydonian chapters use crimson colored robes, but in some episodes he's shown using heliotrope robes, which is more consistent with the Patraxi chapter. So stuff like that, again, just like lightsaber forms.
I was just going to say lightsaber colors. When I was trying to do shorts of characters' lightsabers, and Plo Koon in a random comics has random colors, and I had to say, well, at one point it's purple, one point it's yellow, at one point it's green, but normally it's blue, you know? Like,
yeah.
All right, well, we're getting lost, so and we don't have all day. So yeah. Dr. Who, the Doctor, yeah. Well, I gotta go get my daughter from daycare here soon. So the Doctor makes it to the Cthulhu chapter and runs into the dude who's actually the entity, right? He's not actually this old priest.
Of course, in this city, he of course meets the Deep Ones, and of course he also meets. Again, I apologize if I mispronounced this, but Nyarlathotep.
Yeah, sure. That's a good one.
You know this guy?
Probably. Call of Cthulhu is one of the ones I didn't love. That it's so funny that one's the one that like everyone gravitated for, but I had to like listen to it like 3 times before I got through it. I didn't love it as much as the others. He's probably a character in that. How do you spell, like, if I just type Lovecraft? Give me the first couple letters. I'm sure I can find it.
Let me see. NyA.
Yeah, I got it right away. Nyarlathotep. Yeah, this thing. Oh man, this is great. Yep, yeah, fictional god in created by H.P. Lovecraft, blah 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 blah. First appearance, it's just in Nyarlathotep. See, I'm way off. So it looks like he's really big in a lot of the works of the other authors in role-playing games and things like that. So fictional outer god in the Cthulhu mythos, created by Lovecraft. He made his first appearance in the prose poem Nyarlathotep in 1920. He is a spawn of Azathoth. Duh, you didn't know that? So yeah, it looks like he's pretty all over kind of a lot of the fan stuff. But yeah, but
there's a lot of focus on this guy in the audio. So you think it's, again, just like Carter, you would think he's a major character of Lovecraft's work.
Yeah, but just because I don't know it or I'm not familiar with it doesn't mean that it's not. And also, just because it's not a huge deal in Lovecraft's actual H.P. Lovecraft's work doesn't mean that it's not a big deal in the Lovecraft mythos of all the people who play role-playing games of it, and then all of the fan work in it. Like, you know, they probably have taken characters who are tiny little and really expanded, and that's probably what we're dealing with here.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds basically what you're saying is, it sounds like basically how George Lucas created the universe of Star
Oh,
Wars.
absolutely. It's exactly like that. Yeah.
But a lot of the lore and backstory of a lot of these characters comes from legends and also now canon stuff.
Yep.
Very similar to Doctor Who. Like Doctor Who, at its heart and core, it was just a show that, they wanted to make a show just to have something on television for as many years as it ran.
Yeah.
They never thought about adding new stuff and new lore to any of these. A lot of these came from the audios, the comics, the novels, and whatnot. I mean, one could argue that the modern series is entirely fan fiction because it wasn't made by the original creators. It's still licensed by the BBC, but it wasn't made entirely by fans for the fans.
So it looks like, he's an Egyptian pharaoh, like we stated. So it said it again manifested its form as an Egyptian pharaoh when confronted by Randolph Carter as an avatar of the outer gods, executing their will on Earth in the Dreamlands, which is from the Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath, which is one of the things that Randolph Carter. So, yeah, this dude has messed with Randolph Carter too. So it looks like he's in a lot of, he's all over the place. Whispers of Darkness, The Haunter of the Dark. So, yeah, so it's, so he is all over the place. He just happened not to be in the stuff I listen to, and if it is, I forgot.
Okay. Yeah. And of course, he is using the Necronomicon to perform the ceremony to bring back Cthulhu. I'm pretty sure we both know a little bit of that about this guy.
Yeah, we can move right past Cthulhu.
He's not that important.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Eric Cartman's henchman Cthulhu.
Yeah, henchman. I like that. But yeah, there's the line in the Necronomicon of, I can't remember the exact thing, but it's like the summoner becomes the feast or whatever, and the banisher the
something like that.
The opposite. So of course the Doctor then uses, as the Doctor usually tends to do, uses his enemy's powers against them, and basically uses the writing in the Necronomicon to his advantage to banish both the Cthulhu back where he came from and the Somnifacts out of H.P. Lovecraft's brain. And obviously, Calypso is very quick to act and just traps the Somnifacts in the whatever. And then the Doctor decides to just put him randomly in the TARDIS and completely forget about him like an old sock. And of course, in the real world in this time, the Calypso, Constance, and Lovecraft also visit Arkham, which as a guy not knowing anything about Lovecraft, I'm assuming that's where the inspiration for Arkham.
Batman stole it from them. Yep.
Yeah, that's what I figured. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, Arkham is so right up there with Masonic University. Arkham is used a lot, but that's of course, as they mentioned in the Doctor Who thing, because he spent a lot of his time visiting his parents in a mental institution. So a mental institution is a big part of his psyche, therefore his works. So Arkham is extremely iconic because of H.P. Lovecraft like that. And it got stolen and used all over. And one of the better HP board games is called Arkham Horror, which was a really fun board game where you have to solve things before a crazy Aldrich thing happens. It was a fun board game. Yeah.
I just never really realized that it was an actual real place.
It wasn't. It isn't. It's him.
Oh,
but
it isn't?
Yeah. No, it isn't. Just like Masotonic, it's probably based on a specific thing, just like how his university is, I believe, Brown. But it's not actually based on anything. Lovecraft.
I got it wrong. They go to a mental institution in the audio, but Arkham is in his mind. That's where I got mixed up.
Yeah, it's not a real place. Well, remember, Arkham isn't in his mind. They go to it outside, but it's because what's in his mind is coming out, right?
Yeah, but in his mind, he calls it Arkham.
Yeah. Oh, this is Arkham. Yeah.
So then, obviously, the doctor gives Calypso a lift back to where they need to go, and of course he continues his travels with his two constant companions, Constance and Flip. Not before he gives one of his epic speeches, and we all know the doctor is good on making epic long speeches.
I want to go back before we cover this, please. There's one line that was really important to me, and I would like to
go ahead.
I believe it's Calypso, but I'm not sure. You might be able to tell me. But one of the characters brings up his contradictions of him having a friend who's gay and his wife being Jewish.
Which makes him either a hypocrite or woefully unobservant.
So I don't love that line because that's implying that his love was genuine for his wife. That's implying, oh, you're a hypocrite if you can love a Jewish woman. I don't actually give him that much credit. I've heard some of his I've heard some of the letters that he wrote to his wife. He was mostly estranged from his wife. He lived with his aunts when he was married, and he would write letters to her.
And
he would visit her.
Earlier in the episode.
Yeah, and he would visit her on sometimes, but now I'm really sorry. I'm about to say something really awful. But there is a letter that he wrote to his wife that I will never be able to unhear. It's one of the most hateful things I've ever heard. And it's anti-Jewish, so I'm sorry for this. But I
think you already told the story.
I think I've told you it before, but this is me explaining that just because he married his wife and maybe loved her, I don't know, I wasn't part of this relationship and we don't really know a lot about the relationship, but that doesn't mean that he wasn't a hateful, bigoted piece of crap to her. And that's something that's really important. So she was inviting him to, it was like Christmas or Thanksgiving or something, and he literally said in the letter,
wouldn't invite someone to Christmas.
Yeah, well, whatever it was a gathering. It might not have been Christmas, but he stated, I will not go unless we have an equal number or greater number of Aryans compared to your Jewish friends. Like, that's a thing that he said, which is just, geez, man. So this is important because a lot of people use it to defend him. And then bringing this up of, well, you were married to a Jewish lady. A lot of people say, well, maybe he wasn't that racist because he was married to a Jewish lady. That's implying that he wasn't awful to her racistly, or that he even liked her. Like, we don't really know. And maybe, of course, maybe he did. You know, he married her and stuff, but they were very estranged. But I just wanted to point out that his hate never went away, especially towards his wife. So that line, I don't think he was willfully ignorant, and I don't think that, what was the other one, or really stupid, or what was it? Hypocrite or ignorant. I don't think he was either. I think that he treated these people kind to their face and then secretly hated them. I think he knew his friend was gay, and when he probably deep down in his head, or when his friend wasn't around, I bet he was saying horribly homophobic things. And same with his Jewish wife. I don't think he was either ignorant or a hypocrite. I think he was still a hateful person. I think he was a hateful person who loved these people individually, but that doesn't mean that he's not a racist or homophobic.
But in defense of that line, you got to remember that in the story itself, Calypso doesn't know anything about
True.
They are a person from the 51st century, and they learn about H.P. Lovecraft from just reading about him in essentially futuristic Wikipedia.
Internet,
about all this stuff.
No, and that's true. The writers do, though, and I feel like Calypso is, at least for this line, is there to make that point, and that's just how I read it. And I just don't like that point being made, only because it's a talking point that people use to defend him, and that bothers me, because he was. I don't care who he was married to. He was a bigoted, hateful piece of crap. So,
to compare, some people have used this type of criticism against, believe it or not, the first Doctor, William Hartnell. People always have these outrageous and outlandish things to say about him, saying that he was racist, saying that he was anti-Semitic. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, there are these people who are saying that no, he wasn't really racist or anti-Semitic, because look, the first companion ever His granddaughter was played by a Jewish woman. The first ever director of a Doctor Who episode was a closeted gay person of Indian descent. And now there's a lot of lost in translation stuff with this whole William Hartnell situation. So let me just put it all to rest. William Hartnell was a very specific person that if he liked you, if he respected you, he would move mountains to help you. Like there's always this story with Carol Ann Ford, who's still alive, by the way. I think she's in her 80s at this point. Who, of course, Jewish woman, played the first ever companion of the Doctor's granddaughter. Like he really took her under her wing, and she really did feel like she was legitimately his granddaughter. And he was very, very kind and friendly to Waris Hussein, the first ever director. Of course, the closeted gay Indian person. I think he's also still alive, as a matter of fact. But yeah, if you manage to earn the guy's respect, like he would do anything for you. And there was only a handful of people who he didn't get along with, and he really treated them like crap because he was a person of a certain time and a certain worldview. But that's really where this notion that he was racist or anti-Semitic, that's where it kind of stems from. But I mean, he was almost as complicated as H.P. Lovecraft himself. So there's really multiple ways you can look at it.
Yeah.
But I think we can wrap this up by saying, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, the Doctor has a thing of making long, epic, grandiose speeches. Case in point, that was literally the theme of last month's show. Like all of last month's was about these long, epic, grandiose speeches by the Doctor. And in last week's, in the final closing moments of the audio, Lovecraft even refers to the Doctor himself as being his equal. To which the Doctor responds by saying, "You know, Mr. Lovecraft, you could so easily have been better than you are. Well, I've journeyed throughout all of time and space, and in all my travels, I have never met anyone who professed a doctrine of hierarchical bigotry who didn't place themselves at the top of their social order. It's a blind, hateful, cruel, and cowardly arrogance. It is the rankest of stupidities, and the truth of it is, the people who hold such views make themselves the worst of humanity. They are always the real monsters. And for someone who considers themselves an intellectual, Mr. Lovecraft, the premise that you are somehow superior by virtue of your birth or heritage is the most ignorant, poisonous, and conceited idea you could possibly entertain. So please, do not insult me by suggesting that we are alike in any way."
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty good. I enjoyed it a lot. I enjoyed that monologue. Yeah.
And of course, that's where the Doctor and friends get back inside the TARDIS and fly away to their next adventure. But that is a story for another time. We've got also I don't know if you listened to the last closing moments of the audio, but there's like some behind the scenes with all the actors who were there, the writers, of course, the script editor, and of course we get a bit of an inside look at this iconic TARDIS team of Colin Baker, Lisa Greenwood, and of course Miranda Raisin, who play respectively the Sixth Doctor, Flip Jackson, and Constance Clark. But I mean,
nice.
Any closing thoughts you'd like to add?
No, I guess I'll just throw out a little. Sorry if I got any of my Lovecraft stuff wrong. I told 50 that I was a fan, or I would listen to a lot of Lovecraft. And I've never claimed to be an expert, and that's why I want to say it right away at the beginning. I'm just a guy who has listened to a lot. I do highly suggest a few of them, but always keep in mind when you're listening to them who wrote them. But that doesn't mean that you can't enjoy them. But yeah, there's quite a few Lovecraft stories that I think are really good. Cats of Uthor is amazing. It's one of my favorite. Ulthor is one of the best. It's like a really quick read. But yeah. No, it's kind of all I got. I think it was and Color Out of Space, of course. Really fantastic. Nicolas Cage movie. And Brendan Meyer from the Schmodown was in that. Yeah. But yeah. I got nothing. Do you want me to tell people to go to my channel if they like A Song of Ice and Fire?
Yeah, and before that, I will also wrap this up by saying that the line "separate the art from the artist" is literally brought up in this audio, just not necessarily in the context you would expect. Like,
yeah,
literally separating the artist from the art, and in the form of the art is now manifesting in real life, and you got to separate. Yeah,
I don't think it's fair to say that you need to. I always tell people you can always separate the art from the artist, but that doesn't mean that if I say, hey, I can't watch Bill Cosby anymore. It's not possible for me. I grew up loving it. I did. It's one of my favorite stand-up comedians growing up, but I physically cannot. It makes me want to vomit. And if somebody goes, well, you need to separate the art from artist. No. You can. If you want to enjoy that, go ahead. But I don't need to do anything. So if you can't separate H.P. Lovecraft from his art and you don't want to listen to it because of who he was, that's 1,000% fair. But if you do want to listen to it, as long as you don't ignore who he was, you can do both. You can understand that the person who's coming from was imperfect and enjoy it. But saying you need to separate it, no, you don't. You don't need to do crap. Do what you want. But yeah.
And even the doctor mentions at one point that one of his favorite authors from when he was a kid, he found out later in life that he used to blow up planets for fun, and he just could not bring himself to read his stuff ever again.
He couldn't make it past the first page. Yeah.
So I think we talked enough about Doctor Who and H.P. Lovecraft. So where can the people of the interwebs find you, my friend?
I am over on Something to Talk About. It is my YouTube channel. I do A Song of Ice and Fire content, which also has a bunch of H.P. Lovecraft references in it. George R. Martin adds a bunch into that. There are the old gods and the deep ones. There is a lot of that stuff in there too. And I believe just like cities that have the same name as cities from H.P. Lovecraft. But yeah, check out my channel there if you like lore videos of characters from the Song of Ice and Fire lore. And yeah, that's about it. Thanks for having me on, dude.
Thank you for coming on.
Yeah.
And I'd be very glad to be on your channel whenever you have something that I can contribute to.
I haven't had a guest for a while. That isn't about A Song of Ice and Fire. But if I ever do a Geek Gauntlet again, I'm probably calling you. So,
thanks a lot, my friend. And you can also find me every Monday on this show, The Greatest Show in the Galaxy, every Thursday, also on this channel on Fun with Flags with my good friend Soda. We just did a almost 3-hour show just talking about Peeposh. Go ahead and check that one out. And you can also find me on my own YouTube channel, 50 Shades of Geek, where I do weekly reviews of every single Doctor Who episode from 1963 all the way to 2022. And I'm pretty sure all the way on the first Patrick Troughton season by this point. And you can also check out all these other wonderful channels from in and around the Benverse. Obviously, you only talk about my channel as well as Taco's channel and this channel. We got Galaxy Geeks, Luke's channel, Multiverse of Geekdom, Movie Lovers Unite, The Midnight Cinema, A-Town Reviews, So Dagon Wrestling, and of course, In the Front Row, which is currently not pictured on this thumbnail, but we are kind of working on a new one at the moment, or rather, Luke is, as far as I know.
Yeah.
So that is all we have for today, and next week we will finally be on the topic that I picked out for this month. I just put this episode and the previous one at the beginning to sort of change up the format because of scheduling, because I couldn't quite do it last week, and I really wanted to work with Taco again, so we kind of had to do it this week. So starting next week for the remaining 3 weeks of the month, we will finally be revealing the topic of the month, and I cannot wait to get started on that one as well. So thank you all for watching if you have, and in the words of Missy herself,
don't forget to like and subscribe.
goodbye.